My name is Chris Kelly, and allow me to thank you for tuning into my presentation on arthritis, how it happens, and what we can do about it. My favorite quote when it comes to really anything related to the body is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Okay, and hopefully what comes across in this presentation is that arthritis, even if you are genetically predisposed to arthritis, is not an inevitability. Um, taking 5 to 10 minutes to 15 minutes a day to wash your joints just like you brush your teeth, to take care of your body, to stretch, to do things that are purposeful, to maintain a life of quality is something that is far, far more impactful than a hip replacement or bone building drugs will ever be. So hopefully you will take that from this, and I'm going to explain some ways that that is the case. Now, before we get into this, I want to talk about my story because this is important. And the thing that you have to know about me is I'm really into the body. I'm into biomechanics. I'm into the reasons why things hurt. And long story short, I mean, these are a couple pictures of me in my childhood. And one of my big things that impacted me my entire life was soccer. I played from the time that I was 5 years old to today. And one of my dreams growing up was to get a college scholarship and to play in college. And so I really put everything into that. I put my training, my entire life revolved around that. I mean, when you can see that picture, that's me at 11 years old. That same year, I went to see the '94 World Cup final between Italy and Brazil. You can see down there in the Rose Bowl. That's Roberto Baggio missing his penalty to lose the World Cup for Italy. It was a horrible event for him, but I absolutely loved everything about that moment. I was about 20 feet behind him when that picture was taken, and it's incredible to me, and that just made me fall in love with it. And so, come to a couple of years later, 18 years old, I get a scholarship to a pretty good Division I school. I'm playing my freshman year, and I get some time, but my sophomore year, I'm poised to start, and we are in a college friendly against the University of North Florida. I go to cross a ball, I plant my foot wrong, I miss the ball, I tear my ACL, and it's an ACL there. That's a torn knee, not mine, but a torn knee. And back then, that's sort of like a death sentence. At minimum, I was out for 10 months, and maybe I would come back, maybe I wouldn't. But for them saying that to me, be prepared not to play at a high level. It's like telling me I'm not going to breathe anymore. And so for me, what changed my life was somebody that knew about the body, a therapist, screening me, kind of telling me about my own body, and showing me ways that through my rehabilitation process that I could not only rebuild my body to the point where I could play again, but to do simple things on a daily basis thereafter to make sure that I live a life of quality for the rest of my life. And so, I walked back onto my team about a year later. It was an emotional moment to me. It absolutely changed my life. But since that time, and that was about 13 years ago now, I've been able to continue to play at a high level because I've continued to do simple things to keep my joints healthy. And that's what I see most of all in people that I work with. They want to be active, they want to be healthy, they want to do things that they've always done and that they love, but yet they neglect their bodies for years, and as a result, they go to do an activity or do a sport, they don't move the same way, or they tell themselves I'm getting older, and it's not that at all. It's just that your body is different because you haven't taken care of it. But it's never too late, and that's what I say. So through this presentation, I'm going to give you guys some tools to make that happen, to rebuild resiliency, and to get you back to doing the things that you love. And arthritis is just a construct of anything that we want to do, or a construct of a limiting factor to anything that we want to do. But that doesn't mean that can never be done again. So let's dive in. Those are many of my credentials. You can research those and check those out on your own. And for those watching this presentation that are under the age of 40, um, again, there's always time to do stuff. This is my pet peeve, like people in like Candy Crush and these things. But in reality, again, take 5 to 10 minutes that you were playing the game, apply it to your body, and good things are going to happen. So when we talk about arthritis, we're going to discuss a couple different types. Osteoarthritis would be aging of the joint. And that would be swelling, inflammation, and deformation in a particular area. And so, like, you could have arthritis of your osteoarthritis of your left hip, but your right hip's fine. You could have osteoarthritis of a certain spinal segment. But those typically that'll be localized to a particular area that's going to be overused. Whereas rheumatoid arthritis is an abnormality in immunity, okay, meaning it's going to be more systemic. So you're going to get pain not only in your large load-bearing joints like you would with osteoarthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, that's going to be more overly symmetrical and overall. The causes are different. The mechanisms are a little bit different. They both deal with inflammation, and that's an important point. But typically, osteoarthritis is going to be in larger joints, whereas rheumatoid arthritis is going to be more spread out in smaller joints as well. Gout is also a condition that you can lump in there with those. You know, there are a lot of different things that cause gout, but that's also an inflammatory condition that meets a lot of the same criteria. So we'll discuss that a little bit as well. When we talk about how arthritis affects our joints, we're talking about a normal joint. We have all of these mechanisms to kind of mediate stress. Okay, and looking at the bone, we have this thing called synovial fluid, the synovial membrane, and these sit between the joints and allow the joints to move past each other, kind of like a shock absorber would, or kind of like you know, a oil, you know, would in a car to, you know, alleviate friction. Whereas when I don't have that, you know, over time, due to poor movements, you know, a common example of that is, let's say I sit at a desk for 30 years, and so I sit on the front of my hip, and my bones keep pressing together, pressing together, pressing together. Eventually, that cartilage gets worn away, and we start to get bone-on-bone contact, and when we get ends of bones rubbing together, and cartilage thins away, cartilage begins to thin away, and eventually gets worn away as well. You know, then we truly get bone-on-bone contact, in which surfaces start to create friction, wear each other away, as would erosion, and we start to get a pain response due to pain receptors that in the bone are like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't normal. So they start to react to that. Okay, and so this is, you know, an osteoarthritis is just kind of the end stage of this process, whereas rheumatoid arthritis is an inflammatory condition itself, where because we have inflammation in this area, the bones themselves are going to be weakened and wear away and just become weaker as a result of that process. So they're actually swollen and inflamed within the synovial fluid. So that's kind of where the major difference lies. But the point being is that the bone gets worn away in either case by one of those processes. So we want to be able to differentiate them, but we want to understand that they result in the same thing. And the cause and the solutions are largely the same as well. As we go along, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. So when we talk about types of arthritis, we're going to discuss sort of three. Two is going to be the osteoarthritis, inflammatory arthritis is going to be our major focus. Septic arthritis is going to be due to bacterial infection, and certainly that's a huge, huge issue. But that's really not something that I could speak on because that's going to be the domain of a therapist or physician. So let's stick to osteoarthritis and inflammatory arthritis. Now, when we talk about osteoarthritis, even though analysis typically shows no inflammatory cells are present, the way we relate this to inflammation is that we create mechanical conditions for inflammation. So we do it to ourselves in the sense that I sit on my hip joint long enough, I start to wear away surfaces, I don't pull the bones back apart, so it creates more trauma. And over time, this will create what is called a nociceptive response, where my body starts to feel pain just because it perceives there to be a threat. And as a result, acute inflammation or chronic inflammation can result from this. So we can have a joint that, due to my own actions, is chronically inflamed. For example, my knee. If I shift weight onto one side all the time, or I'm moving up and down, I squat up and down, and I'm shifting weight enough onto one side, and those two surfaces are pressing together, we're going to get chronic inflammation there because, again, that process tells the body to initiate that threat response and keep that threat response going on. So the muscles around that area shut down. Whereas with inflammatory arthritis, this is going to be due to chronic inflammation of the body. Okay, this could be due to a number of different systematic things: chronic stress, from emotional stress, chronic stress generally, emotional stress, nutritional stress, which is one of the big things that we're going to talk about in this presentation, as well. If we have inflammation of the gut, this can lead to the conditions for the development of inflammatory arthritis, and then other things like gout, and that sort of thing. But that's extremely important. And again, osteoarthritis and inflammatory arthritis are independent of one another. So I could have one and not the other, or I could have both. But the bottom line is, one is more based upon the way that we move. The other is more based upon lifestyle factors such as stress, such as nutrition. So when we talk about risk factors traditionally for arthritis, these are some of the major ones. Genetics, obviously, that's going to, arthritis present in family members is going to create a larger risk for us to develop these things. The greatest indicator for future injury as well as previous injuries. So if I've ever had, joint disease in a certain site, or, for me, I'm more likely to develop arthritis in my knee because I tore my ACL. But again, the healing process in that area is never going to quite get back to what it was. Okay, so that's going to be another factor. A lot of people talk about obesity as a risk factor in terms of developing arthritis because there's more load that we have to bear, and that is true to some degree. But that's, for me, unless we're talking about somebody that's morbidly obese, that's not going to be as large a factor as we would imagine. Gender, there are hormonal risk factors or hormonal factors in women, as well as, the Q angle for the hip, of the hips, for example, a woman's build, that are going to predispose them to, greater likelihood for arthritis. And then age as well. As we get older, it is true that our bones degenerate and our joints degenerate to some degree, but not nearly to the degree that you would imagine if we take care of our bodies. But the purple elephant in the room, and the thing that I want to really spend a lot of time on in this presentation, is inflammation. More specifically, chronic low-grade inflammation that's going to be associated with increased risk of arthritic conditions, disease, poor physical functioning, and ultimately mortality. They say sitting is the new smoking. Actually, inflammation is the new smoking. And, there are many, many factors that create inflammation, but with regard to arthritis, oftentimes it's going to be mechanically induced, meaning the way that we move, for better or worse, pisses an area off and keeps it inflamed because it feels that it's under threat. What happens there is that the muscles around that area, because the inflammation shuts them down, don't support the bone and the joint as well. We end up getting more sort of breakdown in this area as a result of that, and then more problems start to stem from this. But inflammation can be caused by mechanics. It can be caused by many factors that we're about to discuss. And so when we talk about risk factors or things that happen, we have a decline of loss of cellular function, oxidative damage, drop in cells, unhealthy lifestyle. All of these things result in aging. Okay, and all of these things are as the result of inflammation ultimately. And so we talk about, how do we stave off the aging process? Basically we mediate our stress factors. Inflammation is the response to stress. It's part of the stress response. And the more that we can mediate this, the more we can minimize this in our bodies. And acute inflammation, meaning inflammation that happens over a short period of time, is a healthy thing. But chronic inflammation is the thing that causes us to age more than anything else. And all of these factors that are listed here are things that happen as a result of that. So with the inflammatory cycle, we have an inflammatory response that typically is going to last about 3 days. And what happens is the area gets covered in water, proteins, white blood cells, the immune system sort of quarantines off this area and initiates the rebuilding process, which is a positive thing. But if that continues to occur, we start to get things like muscle wasting, cartilage deterioration, because the muscles essentially are shut down in that state, and we have an immune system that is still overactive in that area and breaking things down as what it perceives to be a protective response. So in terms of major inflammatory victims, we have our major weight-bearing structures. Okay, we have our spine, our knees, our hips, our wrists, our ankles, and our stomach. Okay, all of these areas are places which tend to become chronically inflamed due to either movement or stress. Okay, and imagine a knee that is inflamed for 20 years. Okay, my dad is currently going through a partial knee replacement as a result of this. Okay, imagine you're going through a divorce and you're horribly stressed out. Okay, what happens? You feel a rumbling in the pit of your stomach. Your stomach becomes inflamed, sometimes due to chronic stress, but it stays that way potentially due to your diet. And as a result, you start to set the stage for conditions for rheumatoid arthritis to develop. So again, not necessarily the only way that it happens, but one of the major ways. So we talk about causes. Number one, food intolerance. Um, Food intolerances usually occur when our gut reacts poorly to specific foods or or additives used in food preparation. Okay, and this could be, we've all probably heard of gluten-free food. Okay, but that could be anything. It could be MSG. It could be any kind of food ingredient. I've seen people that have had an allergy to cinnamon. Okay, so small little allergies, and I believe an intolerance is actually a major reaction, whereas an allergy is a minor reaction. But over time, allergies build up to create systemic responses, especially when we have multiple allergies that are happening together. So the ultimate result is gut inflammation, and if we set off um, enough of our allergies, we sort of trip a switch in which the inflammatory response is triggered, and then we start to get systemic conditions that ultimately promote things like rheumatoid arthritis. You could also say that things like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut, other things like this are related to chronic stress and food allergies. Not always the cause, but they are factors. So, causes of food allergies. Okay, we have, we could say somebody gets bacterial infection, H. pylori. High GMO foods. Weakness in the immune system. One thing that surprised me when I was looking at this stuff is that we have a 50% increase in food allergies in children, and I think that's probably largely going to be due to just more additives in food. More GMO-based products, more things that, more ingredients basically. And as a quick takeaway, the more ingredients something has, the more we can look at it and say this thing is, potentially dangerous because, the more it's going to take our body to break it down. So for us, kind of looking at these factors and trying to get back to things that are a little bit more unprocessed, is a good thing to do, particularly with regard to addressing arthritis. And so some symptoms of food intolerance or food allergies that might, kind of clue you into the need for something like this: gas and bloating, diarrhea, stomach cramping, stuffy nose and mucus production, nausea, vomiting, headaches. One of my big things that I've addressed recently is I was drinking a lot of flavored waters, and as a result of that, I was starting to get I was getting runny noses all the time, and I felt like I was getting a lot of mucus that was building up in my throat, like my nose was always stopped up. So I just wanted to see what would happen. I stopped taking that stuff, and like that completely went away. I was using like Afrin and nose spray all the time, and now I'm not. So and again, it's kind of my own observation, but that's just a small example. If anything, if any of these things are happening, more in a sustained way, then that's something that you really need to look at. When we talk about food intolerances, are pretty common. We can say things like milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, soy, and wheat. But there are many, many others. I've seen people allergic to chicken. I've seen people allergic to so many things that they can't keep food down. They have to have a liquid diet. So there are there's some things that we're going to talk about in the next slide, but the main thing is to be mindful of them. And that could be something as simple as keeping a journal that you write, after you eat something that's caused inflammation. You don't know until you know. So keeping a food log and kind of being mindful of this and writing it down is really a good first step and allows you to kind of pinpoint maybe some of the things that you're going to be a little bit more sensitive to, and then you can start to play around with taking stuff out, putting it back in, or you can do some of the things we talk about in our next slide. So the first thing to think about, and what I'm going to send along with this presentation, is an anti-inflammatory diet protocol, and this is it's called a deprivation diet, meaning we're going to cut out all of the potential things that could create inflammation, and then we're going to start to slowly reincorporate them to see what would cause that. And this takes a while, and it's a process that is not as enjoyable in terms of eating. But if you feel that another route that I would recommend is just getting a food allergy test, and that's I'm also going to send a link along with this presentation for a colleague of mine who does that. I highly recommend that because I think that there's a lot of good value there. It offers a lot of solutions because immediately cut these things out, and it's shocking because you'll see fruits, vegetables, spices, many things that create anything from minor to major allergies, and I'll actually categorize the things that you're more or less allergic to. So what I would do is just really focus on trying to get a good handle on that, and either figure that out via the diet protocol or through getting that allergy testing. But all of these things, limiting exposure to caffeine, looking at spicy foods, they could all be factors. So really getting a good test, kind of knowing what you're dealing with, is an important thing to do. It's something that I would highly recommend. Inflammation cause, too, is going to be more of a factor in osteoarthritis. And this is the one where we have kind of like site-specific issues. You might have areas that feel fine, or you might have areas that are stiff and tight and tender and sore all the time. If you find that it's all over all the time, then that might be more of an issue with rheumatoid arthritis, and that might be something to look at a little bit closer in that way. Whereas if you have one area that is a potential factor, this is going to be mechanical inflammation, and this is kind of my wheelhouse in the sense that I always recommend getting screens. Going to a professional that does the functional movement screen, or the FRA, or something like that, where you can get a closer look at that joint to see, does that joint have full range of motion? Does that joint have active control? But the Center for Disease Control and Prevention defines musculoskeletal disorders as injuries or disorders of the muscles, nerve, tendons, and joints, and disorders of all of these structures that are caused by physical factors such as force, vibration, or awkward posture, aka movement-related diseases. Okay, and so on our next slide, you'll see a number of these different ones, and we have things like osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, fibromyalgia, connective tissue diseases, even rheumatoid arthritis, neuropathies, even rheumatoid arthritis to some degree. Again, I'm not saying that movement is the ultimate cause of these things, but it greatly precipitates these things, and in some cases it is. But the majority of these diseases are first world diseases, meaning they can be almost completely prevented through self-maintenance. And that's why I tell my friends in their 20s and their 30s, starting now is absolutely key. Even if you're, though, in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there's still stuff that you can do about it, but you have to make a commitment to doing it, and you have to make it a part of your life, and it's got to be consistent. So how does this happen? Okay, we have a number of different things that can cause it. From a mechanical perspective, we have prolonged positions such as sitting, standing, any position that crossing my legs on one side versus the other. Anything that holds my joint in a certain position for longer than, let's say, 20 minutes is going to begin to do damage to it. Motion is lotion, and the body really likes movement. If I sit in an area long enough, I start to get, again, that compression that we talked about. When we're talking about the stomach, we have emotional stress, such as constant anxiety, poor breathing patterns, cortisol buildup. I knew a girl that was about 12% body fat. She was preparing for a figure show, and the only issue that she had was just this huge kind of tire around her midsection, where it's like everything else, her stomach was flat, but then you could see where the fat was building up, in her lower abdomen. And unbeknownst to me, she was going through a divorce at the time. She was super stressed out. She wasn't sleeping well. And as a result, cortisol caused fat to build up in that area. So it's amazing what the body can do. But in order to be a healthy human being, we want to address all of these factors. And really, feeling good and doing that and just taking care of ourselves is the key to living a quality life as well, ironically. So, addressing these factors is going to be key through the routine that we're going to talk about. What I want you to realize as well is that everything is connected. So if I have a foot that isn't doing what it needs to do, it acts upon the knee. So my knee, is going to take more stress as a result, which will also create stress in my hips. So, every area is connected, and that's why it's so important to do a little bit for every major area on a daily basis. So what does that mean for you? Okay, how does that happen for us? Number one, you are your own mechanic. We have the power to prevent major joint decay and degeneration through taking care of ourselves. And that means maintaining a high quality of life. You've probably heard of the idea of brushing your teeth. Okay, this is something that we're told to do our entire life to alleviate the need for dental surgery or taking out cavities and that kind of thing, preventing tooth decay. It's the same thing with our joints. Okay, there is no difference. The dental industry embraced this model 40 years ago, and we have a much healthier teeth as a result. The 2000s or the 2010s or whatever, this is the decade of our joints. And this is why it's so important to me that we address this through a simple routine that we perform on a daily basis. So when we talk about our mobility routine, there's some things I'm going to include a handout with our routine after this video. But one of the things that I want to, a couple important principles for this routine. Number one, you want to tense your body in certain areas. And so when I'm doing my joint circles, or my cars we call them, for my neck, every other part of my body is tensed. When I'm doing my shoulder, every other part of my body is tense. And when I'm moving from my toe, again, every other part of my body is tense. So it's teaching us to develop tension and control in certain areas and movement and control in other areas. Okay, and so the other thing is that we can tense at certain levels. If I'm bending over, or if I'm trying to get more mobility, if I'm trying to grind out an area that just doesn't seem to work as well, I'm going to tense it 100% so I can get more movement in that area. Whereas if I am just trying to warm up and just get some light joint circles, I'm going to tense it about 20%. And this, it's not something where you can apply really percentages, but play around with different levels of tension. The other thing is to move slowly. The faster we move, the less we're going to get out of this. I want you to think about controlling minutely each portion of the movement. Go through this like it's a fine wine and really, ruminate on it. In reality, the routine should take 10 to 15 minutes a day. And if you don't have that time, what I would focus on is just the 2 or 3 exercises that are most relevant to you, the areas in which you're most stiff or the areas that just don't seem to move well. Get it in on a daily basis, and you will see a huge, huge difference. Typically, I'll say that we perform this in the morning because our body lays down collagen in the morning, and it kind of lays down connective tissue that lock us into certain positions, for better or worse. And so by doing this in the morning, we help to break up that tissue to make sure that that doesn't necessarily happen. We want to perform 4 rotations clockwise and counterclockwise. And again, move slow and move with control. I'd rather you do 2 to 3 cars or drills than the entire sequence and it not being done well. I want you to get to know your body through this. All right, so really focus on getting as much out of that as physically possible and focusing on that. The last and probably most important thing is if you feel pinching throughout any of this, if you're doing if you feel a closing angle pinch, meaning as I'm raising my arm up, I feel pinching on the top side. Okay, that means that I have some kind of a joint impingement where we do have 2 bones rubbing together. In this instance, I would recommend seeing a chiropractor, physical therapist, or me in order to just get a closer look at what it is and just getting some simple solutions in terms of what to do about it. So action steps this week. What can we immediately begin to do to take care of our bodies and to get healthier? Number one, we want to perform a carbs routine daily to reduce and eliminate mechanical inflammation. Number 2, I recommend keeping a food log or a food mood log to identify your nutrition disconnects and getting on your anti-inflammatory protocol if that's a serious issue for you at the moment. And number 3, if you're dealing with issues of pain or issues with food allergies or whatever it may be, I would highly recommend getting food allergy testing. And if pain is an issue or if you're dealing with just chronic discomfort in a particular joint or whatever it may be, I highly recommend getting movement screens. Okay, and this is something that I specialize in. This is what I do, and what that means is that we're going to break down your body. We're going to look at your joints, and we're going to figure out some solutions to help to give you some motion, help you to move and feel better. So with that said, check out the 2 handouts below for more information, and feel free to contact me. Thank you so much, and I hope you got a lot out of this.